difficulties during the meeting. There it is. Please send a meeting in the message in the chat box. Okay, at this time, we'll ask Ms. Rebecca Devil to start the roll call and determine member participation. Rebecca?
Hi, good morning.
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 City of Annapolis.
Present.
Thank you. Anne Arundel County.
Here.
Baltimore City.
Present.
Thank you. Baltimore County.
Here.
And Carroll County. Anyone from Carroll County this morning? Okay. Harford County. Howard County.
Present.
Thank you. Queen Anne's County.
Here.
MDOT.
Here.
Thank you. MDE. Here. MDP.
Here.
Thank you. MDOT, MTA,
Here.
and MDOT, SHA. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, our first item is approval of the August Technical Committee minutes from August 6th. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Standard question, can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Annapolis moved.
Okay, Annapolis moves to approve the minutes.
Baltimore County seconds.
Thank you, Angelica. Baltimore County. Second. So we'll now vote on the minutes. When your name is read, please indicate aye or nay. And Rebecca, please read down the list of members.
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County, Harford County, Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
and MDOT.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the minutes are approved. So we'll move on to a presentation on the UPWP task force, followed by an action item. And so I guess we'll move on to the presentation. Mr. Dan Pontius, BMC, and Mr. Mike Morris from PRR will provide an overview of the UPWP task and develop a better understanding of public opinions related to housing, transportation, and development in the Baltimore region. Dan, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Pontius. Yeah, you got it right. That's terrific.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. I'm the housing policy coordinator here at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And I really, hopefully this is the start of kind of working together on housing and transportation. We really appreciate the support from the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board for this item. In my work with local governments on their affirmatively furthering fair housing responsibilities, we started to see housing supply as an issue. And you folks have been working on transit-oriented development as well. And so this item was an effort to really understand how people think about this at the grassroots level. And so it's kind of something kind of new for us, and we think we've got some exciting findings here. The consulting group PRR did the opinion research for us, and I want to turn it over to Tracy Strum-Gilliam from PRR to kind of get us started, and then they'll talk about the findings, and I'll talk about the recommendations. So let me try to advance the slide here. And when I turn it over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm Tracy Strum-Gilliam. Good morning, everyone. I have the responsibility of being PRR's East Coast Transportation Sector Lead. And in this particular contract, we've been working over many months with Dan and the team to help to identify and isolate themes and opinions regarding housing choices and transportation needs in the region. It follows on to some work that we completed previously for BMC, and so we're very excited to be here today to talk about the work that we've done. Our project manager was Marshall Bell. Of course, Mike led the research team, which through many phases, which we're about to cover in a second. When we go through the presentation, one of the things I think is important to note is that the work was done utilizing focus groups, survey, and individual outreach. And Dan has been there every step of the way with us. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike so he can talk about our research, and then we'll take questions on the back end. Thank you so much for having us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy and Dan. So I just want to start out by saying this is our executive summary for a much broader report that we'll be excited to share with all of you moving forward. You can go ahead, Dan. Next slide there. So we, as Tracy said, used a qualitative approach for the vast majority of this research. There is a lot of survey data out there, and some of it we even used in this study that tells us things about folks' housing priorities and where they're buying and their thoughts. But we really felt like we needed to get a richer sense of nuance to understand what folks are thinking about in terms of housing, what's shaping their decision making, and what their concerns and interests and problems and thoughts are relating to housing and transportation in the region. And qualitative data really lets us get a much deeper understanding of folks thinking in that regard. So we used a three-part study. First, we spoke with folks from around the region in housing and transportation to understand what they needed to know and wanted to know from the public to make good decisions about housing. And then we gathered a large group of folks, almost 100 individuals, for a 4-week-long qualitative study. Folks signed in every week, spent somewhere between an hour or two on some research and answering questions. And then we pulled a few of those folks together for some focus groups to follow up at the end. You can go to the next slide, Dan. So quickly here, we did represent the 5 core jurisdictions in Arundel, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Harford, and Howard County. And as we go through this slide and the next, Dan, you can see that we were pretty pleased with the representation that we had from across demographic and ethnic groups, as well as income and age. It is a slightly more educated group than the population at large, but by and large, we felt pretty good about having a fairly representative sample from across a number of sort of key indicators, including renting and owning, and a large percentage of voters represented in our sample. You can go to the next slide, Dan. So we want to get into some key findings, and you can keep going, Dan, of what we came across in this research. First and foremost, we learned that everyone is concerned with cost of living, right? It's a top of mind concern for folks across the region. And specifically that folks understand housing as a major contributor and a major concern in that space. So almost 90% of our folks said that they know someone who is struggling with housing costs. They're struggling with housing costs themselves, or they imagine if they were in the housing market right now, that they would be struggling, right? So some of them had told us they bought their houses 30 years ago or even 2 or 3 years ago, and really understand that
Mike, it looks like you're a little frozen up there. Maybe can.
Dan, I'm sending him a message now because he may not realize he's frozen.
So it's him and not me. I just wanted to see it.
Right.
I
It's
can
Mike.
kind of keep us going here while Mike gets back online there. Why don't I just try to keep going while, and then Mike can join us again. But anyway, we thought these. I was surprised. I'm a housing guy, and I was surprised with how many of the people who participated in this effort were had personal experience, whether it's themselves or someone they really care about, who's struggled, or or sort of understand how precarious the situation is if you have to be in the housing market these days. Another finding that we had was that we kind of tested out this idea of the supply. This is something that's only become more in the public eye since we started this study. There we go. Mike, are you back?
I do think I'm back. I'm sorry, Zoom just.
All right, I got us to the next slide. You can
totally
take
crashed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll take it from here. So, Dan, I think I heard you saying that folks did start to recognize that the limited supply was a major driver of that cost, and what was causing that change. And you can go to the next slide there, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So we started to look at what are some opportunities to sort of impact supply, and how does that resonate with folks. So one of the things that overwhelmingly folks in the study supported was the opportunity to rehab vacant housing in Baltimore City. So there was a lot of energy around this, and folks understood this not just as something that could impact housing supply, but that would be a net positive for the region. In economic terms, and in terms including but beyond housing overall. And perhaps most interesting to us, almost 70% of the folks in our study not only supported this sort of in theory, but we're willing to say this is something we'll spend money on, right? That we support our tax dollars going to these types of efforts because we believe that it is worthwhile. It is good for the housing market. It is good for the regional economy, and that is something that we think we can invest in. Next slide there, Dan. Perhaps of particular interest to this group, many were also very interested in transit-oriented development efforts. So about 70% of our group as well thought that transit-oriented development was really the way to go about further development. They could envision places where these projects made sense. They thought linking housing and transportation together made sense. And as we get into some concerns later, they thought this was the way to allay some of the concerns of traffic and other issues that could come along with more housing. So this was really an opportunity that resonated and folks saw value in. Next slide, Dan. And then we asked folks about building in high opportunity areas, which are areas we tend to typically think of as being safe, having good schools, sort of already established and successful, as well as areas where there were high jobs but low housing stock. And there was some more mixed consideration of these two areas compared to the last two we discussed as opportunities, but folks still sort of had an understanding that these were opportunities and spaces that could make sense. But folks, for various reasons, either had trouble sort of understanding what housing would look like in some of these high job areas. They tended to think of them more as industrial or places that folks may not want to live as much. Or they thought that there was some risk, or might just frankly be more opposition to adding housing in opportunity areas as well. So next slide. So having considered these sort of opportunities, we thought, what are the challenges? And asked folks about that as well. The first, and this was something that came across kind of all of our considerations, was that folks were really concerned about affordability, which makes sense, right? It goes together with folks' understanding of cost as a major driver and issue. But specifically, they were concerned that any of the development we just talked about or opportunities to increase housing supply that we just talked about would be too high end, that the cost would be too high, that focus would be on building homes that were outside of most folks' price range, or that, you know, folks couldn't afford. And Dan's going to talk about some opportunities to sort of allay that concern in a minute, but it was something that came up. The next slide. The second thing we explored a bit, because we knew it was something we had heard from leaders and folks in the housing and transportation space, was that schools would be a concern. And we actually found some mix here. More than half of folks, or right about half of folks, did not think that school crowding really should be a concern with housing at all, right? They thought that these two should be sort of viewed separately. Another quarter had some thought that these were things we should be concerned about, but so long as we were sort of thoughtful in how we increased housing, that this didn't need to be an issue. And there was a smaller percentage, about 15%, who did not think that we should be really touching housing without addressing schools, and that it was not fair to do things like we redraw boundaries for schools in order to accommodate housing. But again, this was a much smaller group than we actually thought it would be. And many of these were sort of parents. Parents were somewhat overrepresented in that group. Next slide. So finally, as I mentioned before, traffic and crime did come up as concerns, but again, in a much more limited context than I think we expected. A small number of folks did cite crime as a potential issue. Sometimes this was in conjunction with that idea of transit-oriented development. So I think that's a consideration as we consider how do we move forward with housing opportunities, is knowing that we have to understand that concern and be ready to address it. And similarly with traffic. Again, we saw a lot of energy around transit-oriented design and development. And I think in large response to the fact that folks are concerned that just more houses equals more people, and what does that mean for getting around? So next slide. So yeah, now I'm going to turn it back over to Dan, who's going to sort of talk about the ways that we think that these learnings and opportunities kind of turn into recommendations for policy in the future.
Yeah, here's I mean, the whole idea of this was to kind of, you know, because local officials tend to hear from, you know, tend to hear from kind of small groups of people who are most affected by things. We wanted to get a sense of, you know, if this is a broad problem that our jurisdictions and our region are facing, you know, what do the broad set of folks, the constituents out there think? And so some of the recommendations we have, one key one is that examples go a long way. Mike mentioned that when we talked about, like, well, what do you think of adding housing where there's lots of jobs, like a commercial center, or people got the sense of like kind of adding homes to like a factory, or you know, it's like how attractive would it be to live in an office park? You know, I think people couldn't quite see it, but then when you show them examples of like Annapolis Town Center, Pearl Town Center just outside of the city of Annapolis, or Hunt Valley Town Center, people say, oh, well, that looks great. You know, like, oh yeah, if that's what you're talking about, that's a great idea. So showing people, you know, and transit-oriented development, we had pictures of Owings Mills Metro Center, Woodbury in Baltimore City. You know, we have attractive examples of adding homes to around transit and to job centers here in the Baltimore region that seeing those goes a long way to helping people feel like, oh yeah, that's something we should definitely do. And then more broadly, we had folks read for one of the weeks of this 4 weeks of online input from people. We had them read like 4 articles. This Washington Post article was on the Comptroller's report, State of the Economy, that says that lack of housing affordability is one of the key dynamics holding our whole state's economy back. And what we found is that you know, a lot of people, this idea of housing supply being an issue resonated right away, but reading these articles did get other folks to think, oh, they hadn't been paying attention to this, but now that I look around, you know what, this is right. So people are interested in, you know, tend to be open to information. And for some set of folks kind of in the middle, that can make a difference in terms of how they see this issue. We you know, the way as we talk to folks about the key thing is the idea of supply being a problem, and so I think that's kind of what we were working with here was you know, does it resonate with people that we just don't have enough housing? That's something we heard in our fair housing work as we talked to housing counselors around the region. In particular, in terms of our duty to affirmatively further fair housing, looking at racial homeownership gaps, what those folks said was that there just aren't homes out there to buy, and then rents are going up. So that the idea that supply is behind a lot of these problems is something that people that resonates with people, and once they see that, then they're willing to grapple with some of these other things that absent that. Seeing that as the overall problem, you know, why would you want to redraw school boundaries? That's, you know, people are not, that's not something you would just kind of do as a matter of course. But if people realize like, well, that's actually part of the key of building more opportunity for everybody and making homes more affordable, then people see that's you know, more people see that as a reasonable step. Also, Mike mentioned that people are worried about that. Oh, yeah, we'll get new housing, but it'll all be super expensive. Inclusionary zoning is a local government policy that I know a lot of local governments are considering. Baltimore City just updated its ordinance, and so that is one policy that if local governments were to pass that in combination with adding more housing overall, that could assure people that okay, it's not all going to be high end. Every, you know, developments that come online in our jurisdiction are going to include some affordability. And so overall, and this kind of builds on some work that Dr. Tiffany Manuel did at Enterprise Community Partners, and then in her own firm as well. The idea that to talk about the kinds of communities that we want to create. I think what we found in this opinion research is that people see that the current situation is really limiting opportunity for people who don't already own a home, for kids coming up, trying to get started, for people who don't already have that wealth that comes from a home that's been appreciating for 10 years or so, or have family help. And so these findings kind of indicate to us is that we can talk about building communities in our jurisdictions that work for everyone, and that you know, there are some challenges, you know, whether it be zoning or crowded schools, you know, people really concerned about a particular site near where they live, but we can you know, we need to rise to the occasion and tackle big challenges, and we can do it with transparency and sensitivity. That's some of the feedback we got. People kind of in the middle, they're like, well, if you really listen to people and are open about things, we ought to be able to do this. So that's our kind of final. That's sort of the taking what we learned in this 4 weeks of online research and the focus groups, and trying to translate it into things that local officials, if local officials are, you know, see this as a problem and want to tackle it, these are some ways that you can do it that will resonate with the citizens. So I think that's it for our presentation.
All right, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Mike. Tracy, anybody have any questions? Any follow-up, any thoughts? I can tell you these are long-term issues for sure. You know, when I came to Maryland in 2001, they had just seen a lot of growth in the late 80s, a super amount of growth, like in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, took off in the 90s, continued in 2000s. Definitely long-term trends, definitely related to good planning, but also sort of at the market, and you know, the economy sort of really dictates a lot of this too. So It's a combination of policy, market, economic conditions and all that. But some great research. Baku?
Oh, just trying to understand in terms of how this could be solved, because given the fact that this is a more of a capitalist economy where the prices of goods and services are determined by the forces of demand and supply, as they did allude to. So in trying to find a solution to that, what kind of role government, especially local government, can play to ease that? I'll give example of the Eastern Shore where I live, where when I moved in there, it was very, very affordable. Generally, Eastern Shores, especially in the more rural areas, we have a lot of low-income households. And then we have seen prices of homes actually increase dramatically. That if you relate the increase to the average household income, the person in Talbot County, for instance, cannot afford. And yet we have this has been built and being sold at a faster rate. So far as the demand is there, the builders will take advantage of the demand to increase prices. I mean, you have seen where every week, for no apparent reason, the price of a house will be increased by 10, 25,000 every week, just because the builder sees rush of people coming to buy. So with that in mind, what is the role that the government, especially local government, can play to make housing more affordable, apart from zoning policies and things like that? Because it makes it very hard to understand how, given that it's a more capitalist society, we don't talk about price controls. So far as there is a demand, why can't we charge more? I think that is what is driving the market. And if that is the case, what can we do to make housing more affordable?
Well, that, I mean, if you, it goes back to, economics 101, supply and demand. The only reason they're able to charge more is because there's a lot of demand and there's limited supply. And in terms of local governments have a lot to say about the supply of housing. I mean, and this is not a quick fix, as Dan mentioned. These are long-term things. I mean, that's one challenging aspect of this is that, you start to work on a solution, you're not going to see the results until, it takes a while to build more homes. But we're actually we're doing a fair housing study right now. In fact, I have another meeting. Mike and I are going to present this again at another meeting here in Columbia later today. And we're getting statistics on just how much of the region is off limits to development to homes that would be open to families because of crowded schools. I mean, that's one of the things that sort of that started this this effort that got us to do this was, between zoning, which zoning itself restricts the supply of homes, and then the adequate public facilities ordinances. There actually is a lot, local government in some ways is the key to how much supply there can be out there. And if you can get the supply up more to where the demand is, then that's where they won't be able to charge that premium anymore. They won't be able to raise prices $10,000 a week, or that's actually the Baltimore Metropolitan Council sponsored a trip to Minneapolis, and this made news for a while. During the pandemic, while everyone else was really suffering from inflation, Minneapolis was actually building a whole bunch of homes, and the rents and the for sale, the rents in particular really were flat through the pandemic, whereas in the Baltimore region they really went up.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of research on this, but we've talked about affordable housing as well and trying to encourage additional affordable housing. But some of the research I did on Anne Arundel County was the total number of units, just looking at the census data. I don't know how accurate it is, but the total number of units actually kept in good line with the population. But, is it like investors buying up units, or available housing is not always the same as the amount of housing. And so at least in Anne Arundel County, it seemed like the number of units kept up with it, but you're right, like the available housing is down, and of course, affordability of those is up. So at least in Anne Arundel County, it didn't seem like it was the total number of units. It's, I don't know if it's the type of units being built, or the, like I said, other people buying them for the Airbnb, or I don't know what the, have you seen the difference, or why, housing is maybe not available versus, there?
There is we're looking at, we've been paying attention to a new nonprofit group called Up for Growth, which has taken a look at new household formation, kind of comparing new household formation now to back in around 2000, and finding that a lot of, we're not creating, there are more kids living with their parents, or, people doubling up who might otherwise want to break out on their own and create a new household. And so that's part of the dynamic. You mentioned, that we obviously have Airbnb now, which can tie up some homes that otherwise would be available for long-term rental. You have corporate actors kind of taking advantage of the limited supply, sort of seeing an investment opportunity, that if they can use their deep pockets to buy up homes that otherwise would go to homeowners and convert them to rental, they can make a bunch of money because of the limited supply. And so, I think a perspective that's becoming more accepted, I think, is that more supply helps all of this. If we had more homes, there wouldn't be as much of a financial incentive for corporate owners to buy up single family homes and convert them to rental. So that's and there is a lot of sense. I mean, we see it in our permit data here at BMC. We just haven't been building after 2000 the way we were before. And so anyway, so that there's more to be done. I'm sure we could look into these statistics and kind of dig into the data a little more. We're doing that in our fair housing study that's underway right now, and we can certainly dig into this if that's helpful for local governments in kind of considering how to proceed on this topic.
Just a quick comment on corporations buying available housings and in turn renting them out. There is a development in my area, and that is exactly what is happening. When I did the math myself, it was just amazing how about 67% of more than 400 homes being built have already been purchased by companies who in turn actually rent them out. Of course, nobody knows how much these corporations are paid for those homes, which makes the available housing for retail very, very, very limited. And therefore, the developer can even charge more for that. And that seems to be a trend that's going on. I don't know whether it's around the country, but at least on the Eastern Shore where I live here in Maryland, that is something that has picked up very significantly over the few years since the pandemic.
Okay, Dan, there's a question in the chat that either you or Mike could answer. It is, do you have any insights on the key factors that influence people's housing choices?
Yeah, thanks, Regina. And I saw that there. I think one of the things that we found in this research that I guess was underlying the whole message, but probably wasn't quite as explicit, is that cost is absolutely the biggest driver for folks. We heard from all sorts of people who had factors like their commute, schools, local amenities, etc., that were on their list, but all came secondary to cost, right? So many folks told us, I wanted to live in place X because of how close it was to my work or because of the schools, but I wound up having to live in place Y because it was the best option that got me close to those things, but that I could afford. So, obviously, I think that maybe isn't a shocking answer, but really what was shocking was how much we heard folks say that they had to make sacrifices and take on, as Dan was saying before, roommates or live longer in other places, because in order to get the other things that they wanted, whether it was schools or commute times or location or amenities, they had to make cost decisions that they didn't expect or didn't expect to be as drastic as they wound up being. So price again really is the driver there.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, do we have any other questions for folks?
But I've mentioned this fair housing study, so I just put the link in the chat there. So that's mainly your local government, your local housing agency folks are taking the lead on that, but it really does. We do look at transportation and education and other things as well.
Thank you, Dan.
Great.
All right, great presentation. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Look forward
Thank
to
you
a
all.
follow-up. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on to item number 3, which is our recommended action on resolution 25-9. This is a resolution and request from Howard County to add a project to the 25-28 TIP. And is it Ms. Funkin? It's going to make start this off.
Yes, thank you so much, Dan, and good morning. As Dan mentioned, in Resolution 25-9, Howard County is requesting to add one project to the TIP, traffic signal and crosswalk improvements. This project will add pedestrian signals and crosswalks at various intersections throughout Howard County. Mr. Connor Jett from Howard County will present the details of the project. Connor, you can take it away.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to also say I'm here with Subin George from our Department of Public Works Highways, who is the project manager and engineer on this project, so he can answer any technical questions if they come up. Amendment purpose, as we said, we're going to add this new project to the 25-28 TIP. It needs to be included in the TIP to receive NEPA approval. We're at this kind of middle area, which I'll say in a second, that we did confirm that NEPA approval, but we need to go through this for obvious formalities. So Howard County is requesting federal funding, 90% of the project for construction. Funding is coming through the HSIP, or Highway Safety Improvement Program, grant of about $1.28 million. Engineering and design work fully funded by Howard County, and design work is about 95% complete as of right now. So this in particular is a group of several projects together. It's spread out. I really didn't include an entire map of what that looks like, but I'll run down the key intersections we're looking at here. Cedar Lane and Freetown Road, Cedar Lane and Owen Brown Road, Broken Lamb Parkway and Cradle Rockway South, Harper's Farm Road and Beaver Kill Road, Longgate Parkway and Wheatfield Way is that 5th one. So if anybody's familiar with these intersections include minor collectors, arterials, and local roads, bridging trip generating commercial and residential uses. So I took the example on, as you'll see on the image to the right there, you have Broken Lamb Parkway, bisecting that from the from the top view of the screen to the bottom, and that intersection with Cradle Rockway South. You have that residential uses on your right there, and then all that commercial completely separated from that on the left, with that intersection trying to bridge that gap, making that safer for our pedestrians and bicyclists, whatnot. Next slide, please. Okay, so what this project looks like, this is going to be a complete reconstruction of traffic signal infrastructure at these intersections. We're going to upgrade and add new crosswalks with accessible and audible pedestrian push buttons, also known as APS, Countdown pedestrian signal heads, or CPS, and then traffic pole mounted LED streetlights as well to help with visibility. In addition, 12-inch vehicular signal heads with backplates and retroflective borders are going to be installed. And we're gonna reconstruct those sidewalk ramps to current ADA standards. New traffic poles with upgraded signing and pavement marking improvements as well. Also, in addition, signal phasing improvements to improve operations at each intersection to help with that. And I just wanted to highlight that no additional vehicle lanes will be added as part of this project. Next slide, please. So where we're at with this project, and before I move on to that, I did want to, we added a couple images of what this will look like to give you guys a better indication. On the right there, that's an additional intersection that we have. But that might be the completed one. Subin can chime in there in a second, but you have the plans at the bottom as well, just to understand the scope of what this looks like. So our project schedule, so Cedar Lane and Owen Brown is currently complete, and then we have our Cedar Lane in Freetown, the Broken Land one that I showed a aerial view of earlier. Our Harper's Farm Road at Beaverkill are all 95% complete. And we're still working on some easement issues for the placement of those traffic poles at that Longview Parkway at Wheatfield Way for the design for that. As I said before, NEPA approval was completed in July. This is our kind of official step for that. And then right of way and utility certification, we're still working through as we move toward that construction in this upcoming summer of 2025. That's about it. I tried to be kind of brief for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, Subin is here as well if you have any additional technical questions on that.
Hey, Connor, this is Dan. Can you go back to the slideshow and the aerial of that location?
Sure.
And is how much federal funding is projected for this?
But this is 90% for construction, 1.28 million. Whatever.
Okay, I didn't see the cash flow.
Okay.
Do we have a slide? Oh, there it is. All right, is any developer assistance with this one?
Not that I think of. Subin, is that correct?
No, correct. There's no developer assistance for any of the 5 signals.
So this is part of your long-term improvement program, I guess, county level.
That correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Well, we'll probably get to questions in a little bit. So I'll now ask for a member to approve Resolution 25-9 and then a second. Does any member have any questions or comments on this? Well, let's do want to do the roll call first?
Okay, so we need motion to approve, right?
Just
First,
a
and then-
motion. Yeah,
let's
okay.
get a motion in a second
Yeah.
and then take comments.
Okay, Annapolis moves for approval.
Thank you, Kwaku. Annapolis moves. Brian?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Anne Arundel County second. Okay, now do we have any questions or comments? And any members of the public have any comments or questions?
I do not see anything in the chat box.
Thank you, Regina. Okay, we'll now vote on approval of Resolution 25-9. When your name is read, please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, can you please read down the list of members?
Sure. Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City, Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County, Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
and MDOT.
Aye.
I'm not sure if I heard Baltimore City. I'm sorry. Was there a reply from Baltimore City?
Unfortunately, they had to leave.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. All right, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. All right, the resolution has passed. We're going to move on to item number 4, UPWP updates, and to begin the discussion of the FY 26-27 UPWP. Unified Planning Work Program for Baltimore Metropolitan Council. Members of the staff will start discussing topics of interest from the AMPRO conference. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So it's a little early, but we're going to start talking, as Dan had mentioned, about the fiscal year 2026 planning budget that is also known formally as the Unified Planning Work Program. We normally start developing topics at the end of the fiscal, or at the end of the calendar year. Then in February, we present a draft work program to the Tech Committee. We go out to a 30-day public comment period. And then in April, we come back to the Technical Committee to make a recommendation on the final work program, normally approve it at what is normally an in-person elected official meeting of the BRTB in April, submit it to our federal partners, and then we develop local contracts, and the money starts flowing in July 1st of 2025. We do run on the state fiscal year, so again, we're July 1st to June 30th. So next slide, please. So several of the members were able to join us at the AMPO conference. We gave everyone the task of looking around the country, trying to see if there are any interesting topics that we might be able to bring back to the Baltimore region. So we want to start that conversation today. I'm going to talk about a couple of the topics that might be of interest to the members, and then hopefully next month at the November meeting, or during the period between this technical committee and next technical committee, we can start hearing some suggestions from the members about potential topics. Some that might be of interest are listed here in this slide. The first one actually came from some discussions at the Bikeable Baltimore region meetings. And during the development of our latest Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, we're having discussions about how do we rank, how do we measure ourselves in terms of both bicycle pedestrian facilities, activity, and investments compared to other regions, and when will we be able to kind of show success? We have been seeing increased investment in different bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We've also seen many planning efforts that have gone on both at the BRTB and then also at local jurisdictions. But this might be an interesting topic just to kind of see how we're doing compared to other like regions. Another item that many of you have heard about is that the Maryland Department of Transportation is undergoing the development of a new prioritization process. This is being mentioned at the CTP tour meetings, and there's going to be some upcoming meetings discussing that prioritization process. This likely will take the place of the old Chapter 30 scoring system. We understand that MDOT is hoping to try to get some sort of prioritization underway for the fiscal year 2026 CTP, or Consolidated Transportation Program. What we thought might be helpful is if the BRTB kind of steps in, starts assisting some of the local members in developing and reacting to the new prioritization process to make sure that you get all the paperwork in correctly, and that we have projects that will fit in well to that prioritization process. The next two are actually items that I saw at the AMPO conference, thought might be interesting for our members. One kind of dovetails on some previous work that we've been doing, trying to raise the level of competency of our transportation planning professionals here in the Baltimore region. This was actually a project out in Honolulu and in Hawaii, where they actually started looking at training some of the transportation project management staff on delivery of projects, development and delivery of projects. We know that you're hiring a lot of new people. Those people have to kind of learn on the go in terms of how projects are developed. This might be able to kind of supplement that work. Another item that was big in the conference was Complete Streets. We know that the state has developed a new Complete Streets policy, and we know that a number of our jurisdictions have Complete Streets programs. It might be an interesting topic to kind of review the new state highway guidelines and compare them to some of the local jurisdiction guidelines, try to make sure that they're consistent so that we are kind of applying Complete Streets appropriately in the different areas of our region. Then we normally have funding continuation for some of our programs that have been pretty successful over the past couple of years. We've heard a lot of interest in renewed funding for the Transportation Land Use Connection grants. We've actually, the Federal Highway Certification Review came back and kind of applauded the work that the BRTB does in terms of supplementing some of the locally operated transit systems training that we normally do through TAM or the Transportation Association of Maryland. So we would probably like to see, additional funding in that program. And then we've also recently introduced the Transportation Planning Institute through AMPO. We're hoping to kind of supplement some of the existing courses on there, try to make sure people know it's out there. Then also we could start looking at other segments after we've completed 30% design of all of the Patapsco Regional Greenway, or we're getting close to that. We can start looking at potentially some other segments for Greenway design. So that's it, but Regina, if you could just flip to the next slide. Hopefully everyone has contact information. If you have interest in any of these specific topics or other topics that you would like to see in the upcoming work program, please make sure to reach out to myself or to Regina, and then we can include that in the future presentations and future discussions for what will be included in the fiscal year 2026 UPWP. Any questions or discussions about any of these topics? Okay, I will turn it back to the chair. Thank you very much, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Yeah, I can tell you, we're still working on the prioritization process. In fact, I'll be getting some briefings coming up soon, so we may have more information. Probably closer to the end of the year, beginning of next year. So with other business, the next technical committee meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th. And it's a virtual meeting. Timothy, do you have any questions?
Dan, I just wanted to take a moment under other business to introduce our new transit planner. This is Tim Briggs. He has joined the team. So, Tim, if you just want to say hello, let people see you.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Regina mentioned I'm new to BMC. I'm very excited to be here. Housing is a big interest of mine. And obviously with the transit connection, I'm looking forward to what comes out of Dan's work. So thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Hearing no other business, I'll ask for a motion in a second to close the business meeting. I get a motion to close the business meeting?
Annapolis moves.
Annapolis moves.
Queen Anne's County will second.
Thank you, Steve. Queen Anne's County seconds. All right, I think that's it.
Real quick, Dan, we just had a notice in the chat box that Tuesday, November 5th is a state holiday. So we'll regroup and coordinate the next meeting with everybody.
All right, great. Yeah, I know we have a lot of action items for the November meeting. Will that be in person or
No.
virtual? Virtual.
There
Okay.
are action items in November, which we're going to That probably is all the business. It will only be action items because it is a short meeting to be followed by the Congestion Management Committee. So we won't have any informational items, just the action.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Take care.